we'll see.
Yeah.
But I think all the stuff that we are mostly concerned about is a lot of it has come
Some
out.
of the good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it
I
has
think
come
on
out.
that note, let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of TBIT, guys. With me as always, Neo. How are you doing, sir?
I'm alright, Regardt, and how are you?
Good, good. Some exciting news coming out of CES this week, and that is exactly what we'll be talking about today.
Yes, indeed.
Some of the goodies that we've seen and some of our favorite picks, I think, from CES. It's day 3 today, I think, or was it day 2 in the States?
I'm
Day 3,
really
day 2.
not sure, but it's definitely not day 1, that's for sure.
Please stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. So yes, CES week. This is usually the time when most techies in the industry is very excited about what the future holds for our technology.
That's right.
But the main theme that we've seen this week is mobile and AI.
Definitely.
Interesting times. I mean, especially on the mobile side, we've been seeing it coming for a while, but we see the notebook manufacturing. We're going to talk about the chips that AMD and Intel have been speaking about. But I mean, the theme definitely is we're going to see gaming on mobile increase. I'm talking about mobile computing devices. It's a very interesting time, and I think it's a sign of the times where we know the problems that people had with trying to get hold of the desktop cards.
Oh yeah.
It's now also an option of giving them that same quality performance in a mobile device, because people just, they need to get their hands on that power, right? So let's start with AMD and Intel. Can you tell us a little bit about what the announcement was and what the key takeaways was?
So obviously, as you get with CES or any other time when Intel or AMD has an announcement, the other competitor has to have an announcement as well. So this time it so happened to be both CPUs. Now, obviously, we have 5000 series Ryzen, which we spoke about previously,
Yes.
and that's now available on the mobile platforms, on particularly desktop, notebook PCs. So what we have here is basically CPUs that are limited to about 45 watts because it's notebooks, right? 45 watts. So there are SKUs from 45 watts, 35 watts, and all the way down to 15 watts.
Nice, yeah.
And scaling with cores appropriately. I think the highest end SKU has about 8 cores, 16 threads, and that's a 45 watt SKU. And that's actually quite impressive if you think that's 8 cores of computing power. And if you get one of those AMD CPUs in your mobile system or whatever it is, that literally gives you the fastest, at least gaming performance, or if not outright performance, that you can get on a mobile platform.
So you were also talking about the AMD's 8-core situation. I mean, how does that differ from what we've seen before?
Oh, actually, it's a good thing that you asked. So on the desktop, you have the 5900X and the 5950X. So that's a 12 and 16 core part, respectively. But on the mobile front, you can't actually have 12 cores or 16 cores, or
Because of the power issue.
Because of power issues and so forth. So the limit there is just 8 cores. But you still get the 5900 SKU, and I think there might be another higher end SKU. But either way, point is that differentiated by clock speed rather than core count.
Interesting.
Okay, so the maximum core count you get is 8. However, if you go higher up in the SKU, you get, I think, boost frequencies of up to 4.8 gigahertz. And
That's impressive.
It's very impressive, actually. And like I said before, you're still getting the fastest essential mobile computing experience that money can buy.
I mean, again, that line is blurring very, very quickly between notebook processing power capabilities and desktop.
Definitely.
I mean, of course, desktops always will be leading the pack. But I mean, I've had this Alienware now for 3 years. I mean, it's a 17R4, and it's still kicking ass compared to many desktop computers today. I can only imagine when you get one of these new devices with one of these new CPUs, I mean, that thing's going to be relevant for a while, and you're going to be able to play the latest AAA titles.
Hugely so. And I mean, 8 cores is essentially what most people use. Anything higher than that is for people who use power users and so forth.
And then they will likely use a desktop in any case.
And they will use a desktop, and there are fewer of those than the rest of us mere mortals. Okay.
So what about Intel? I mean, Intel also very strong on the mobile side. We saw them talking about notebooks, especially the small form factor notebooks that's mainly used for lifestyle and business use.
But of course.
Where are they heading?
Okay, so for Intel, it's actually a very interesting thing. As we all know, Intel has had some challenges with their manufacturing node, getting essentially more gates into a smaller space, right? And AMD has been very successful on that front. So Intel has been behind a little bit. However, it seems like they are actually ramping up production, and they are seemingly sorting out those issues. So on the mobile side for them, this actually works very well because they're able to offer high performance CPUs now at very low power draw. I think 28 watt CPUs we have now with 11th gen core.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, for those of you who don't know, just remind us, what does a desktop CPU equivalent to run at normally in terms of wattage?
Oh, wow, you're looking at something, in fact, depending on the power state, you're looking at up to 250 watts.
That's a massive jump from a notebook capabilities of 20 odd watts to...
Exactly. So, and all of this comes about as a result of the 11th gen core CPUs, which is what Intel was actually talking about. Now, these are not available for desktop right now, but on the mobile platforms, you actually are able to get them. I think more this year than last year.
Yeah.
Because availability was very low on that side. But this year, you definitely should be able to get more. So these are low power but high performance cores, probably in line with what AMD is actually offering.
Interesting. So we're seeing kind of neck on neck performance in the mobile space.
Yes, so now it's just power. Who can give you more power? Who can give you lower power draw for the same performance?
Now, the other question that we're going to segue into nicely, or the other fact here, is the Nvidia side of things, because they also made some pretty impressive announcements, I think.
Yes.
How will Nvidia fit into the new notebooks versus AMD with their own graphics?
Well,
because they don't have mobile graphics
not
as
for their
well
latest.
as Nvidia has
Definitely
in terms
not.
of performance.
Definitely not. So, I mean, look, AMD is going to have mobile iterations of the RX 6000 series at some point, but that's just not where we are right now. At CES, what Nvidia presented was literally the fastest graphics performance that money can buy. And they have that lead right now. And what we saw, particularly related to mobile platforms, is that they released the 3000 series of GPUs for mobile, right?
Yeah,
and that's I think the highest Q they have goes up to 150 watts, 130 watts, or somewhere along those lines. Actually, let me make sure. Yes, it's 150 watts for the 3080. So if you are able to get that sort of power into a mobile platform, this means that you can get performance that rivals most desktops, if not beats it.
So if I understand you correctly, the CPU will then generally runs at a much lower power requirement.
Yes.
But your mobile graphics card will always require, those big power draws.
That's the nice thing. It's actually scalable. So that 150 watts was actually for the 3080. But going down to the 3070 and the 3060, obviously the power requirements scale accordingly.
But are we talking about the MaxQ version of it?
MaxQ versions. Okay. We're talking about the MaxQ, which are the low power versions of the GPUs that we have.
And one of the most impressive notebooks I've seen in that line, and I will never forget the first MaxQ notebook I looked at, was a MSIG. It was a Slim series, the 64 Slim series. I don't know if you remember.
Was it a stealth or something?
It was probably a stealth or something, but it was thin, not gold trim. And I've seen some MSI notebooks popping up now, obviously with the new graphics cards. I mean, damn, that's impressive.
Oh, of course. I mean,
a notebook's at what? Just under 10 centimeters or 10 millimeters? What is that? 10 millimeters?
Of course.
16 millimeters thin.
In fact, there's actually one that, not from MSI, but from ROG, that was, I think, what is it called? The ROG Flow X13, which was also presented during CES.
Nvidia showed it on their presentation, didn't they?
Exactly, right. So this is really impressive. It's only 1.3 kilograms. Now, graphics-wise, it's only using a GTX 1650. So you might be thinking, man, that's like older GPU and it's not as powerful. However, there is an external GPU that ROG showed off for that notebook. And this external GPU is not only the smallest external GPU enclosure we have, it's also the lightest. And it supports a GTX 3080.
So would you put a full desktop size card in there, or is it a MaxQ type external GPU?
It's a MaxQ type external GPU. At least that's what I think right now, because just looking at the size, it's just way too small to house a full size.
So that's obviously, it's obviously aimed at gamers who's going to get that external graphics card, but I would imagine that's more of a production style workhorse for some creatives.
Definitely.
Or basic gaming rather than high end.
It can for the flow.
Yeah.
That's for people who just want to be on the go, and you can play actually basic games. I mean, a 1650 is good for 1080p gaming. Obviously, you're not gonna turn up all the graphics detailed and so forth. But if you're on the road, you're trying to play some PUBG or Fortnite, it's more than capable.
And I think we need to realize this is exactly why these companies are going this route, because a lot of gamers now, especially the younger generation that I see, when I get calls for people asking what to get their kids or their teenagers, notebooks always seem top of mind because it's a workhorse school tool and you can play games with it. And it's certainly, I mean, this is again a bigger package than we'd normally buy, my Alienware 17. But I cannot imagine going back to a full-time desktop use only.
Yeah, there are people who
It's
actually,
crazy.
once you move over to your mobile platform, they never go back to desktops. And that just speaks to how powerful these have become. And especially if you plug it in and you use it as a desktop replacement, you can basically turn up the performance because you're not worried about battery life and so forth.
Exactly.
And in that context, you're actually getting desktop performance.
But I think it's also fair to say that most people that go into gaming notebooks today, or everybody that goes into gaming notebooks today, realize battery isn't, you're not going to be doing anything on battery life, maybe getting an hour or two. No. Again, we've seen some exceptions to the rule. We have gaming notebooks that last a couple of hours, but they are just very good at power management. Now, this is another thing we should mention, right? Because Nvidia announced a technology that's going to improve how the chips communicate with the RAM and the other processors, right? Yes. Where before it was one channel, and now it's able to, in real time per frame, address each of these.
So there are two things that we're actually talking about here. There's the resizable bar, which actually AMD introduced for us with their RX 6000 series of GPUs, where the CPU is actually able to access all of the graphics memory on the GPU, whereas right now it's only able to access a particular portion of the memory. So what that does is it creates a lot of wait states, it creates a lot of traffic between the CPU and the graphics memory. So with resizable bar, you don't get that anymore because all of the memory footprint on the GPU is available for the CPU to access. And that actually boosts performance. So Nvidia has brought that over to their graphics cards as well. And I can imagine that this works with both AMD CPUs and Intel CPUs as well. And then when it comes to power, Nvidia introduced for us the MaxQ, I think 2.0 technology. Yeah. So this allows, once again, power to be controlled per frame instead of just you're controlling it per cycle perhaps, or fixed time intervals. So right now, you are able to dedicate more power to the GPU, or more power to the CPU, or more power to the GPU memory, depending on the load of the game. And it's able to do that dynamically using AI. So that's pretty interesting on NVIDIA's side.
And you just mentioned a word that we've been hearing a lot at the CES. AI. Exactly. I mean, we're not unfamiliar with AI, but it seems to have taken on a different kind of life all of a sudden, in that we're seeing it intelligently driving a lot of our things. I mean, from intelligent fridges that we've seen at CES being driven by AI, I think it's fair to say that we're now living in, I think you summed it up just before, it feels like we're living in the future now.
Yes, it actually does. It actually does. Remember that old show Beyond 2000? We're showing our age now, but remember the show, right? All of those
Sunday afternoons.
Exactly. All of those things that they showed there, we're actually starting to see them now with the Samsung robot arm and so forth, and all of it powered by AI.
It's insane. And again, for those of you that might be uninitiated, the AI we're talking about here is very clever in that it's programmable computing cycles, really, or clever computing cycles, in that a processor would intelligently look at a scenario and then make a decision based on it. So in Samsung's robot, we should actually talk about, we were going to talk about it a bit later, but one of my most interesting things that I saw was Samsung's robots that they introduced. And they actually, apart from looking really cool, they seem to be super functional and intelligent. Obviously, we've seen set up demos where the robot takes a dish, he analyzes a sink, takes out a dish, puts it in the dishwasher.
Yes.
That is pretty intelligent. It needing to understand what it's looking at, where the edges are of the dish or whatever it's picking up, real time figuring that out, and then making calculations based on it. What is your prediction for where AI is going to take us?
I cannot tell you. You know, the thing is with predictions, you always end up wrong. You go 10 years from now and you're like, yeah, some things I could have imagined, other things I got completely wrong, and other things came out in a way I couldn't have imagined, you know. But I can definitely say that AI is going to be huge for all of us. Because it can be implemented anywhere, whether in robotics, as you just said, was for Samsung. We're talking in visuals, in displays, like Samsung once again with the 8K upscaling.
That's also interesting. We should maybe quickly note that. Yeah, so Samsung showed a demo where, I mean, we're all familiar with upscaling. Sometimes it doesn't work as well, especially on some TVs that you get with, the picture just seems a bit off when you upscale anything. But again, analyzing frame by frame, getting some clever AI to do the job.
Yes.
Analyzing what's in the scene and then just making it crisp and sharp.
Exactly. And we actually saw this Nvidia using exactly the same AI to upscale images that are rendered natively at full HD and bringing you 4K quality. And we saw this with DLSS.
Oh, yes.
So it seems that AI is actually having a huge impact on how we see things and just scaling up the visual fidelity of pixels and so forth without necessarily loading the host computer and so forth in terms of processing power.
Yeah, and that takes a big burden off the CPU if you can upscale, because it's a different processing that's being used. Mobile, definitely the future. I'm very excited to see the notebooks coming. I'm very excited to get some hands-on time with the notebooks. Nvidia mentioned, and we'll show them up on screen, the three that stood out for me when they showed in their RTX demo was with the 3060. The laptop was a Lenovo Legion Slim that they claim is faster than the PS5, which, I mean, looking at the specs, you can see
in theory, yeah. I mean, for the 3060, what are they talking? They're talking about, I think it's 13 teraflops or something like that of shader performance. How Nvidia calculates that is very interesting, or creative rather.
Their own algorithms, yeah.
Rather, but nonetheless, it still has a lot of computing power, particularly GPU computing power, and to be able to fit that in such a small form factor.
That's insane, yeah. That 30, the RTX 30 in a notebook, I mean, this is stuff for the future. On the RTX 3070 side, the Asus G15 seems to definitely be the one to keep an eye on. But my knees went weak when I saw the Alienware M15 with that 3080.
Tell me about it. What was so amazing about that one?
Look, no, we need to leave that for another episode. I will drool all over this one. But I mean, as a fan, you can clearly see I've been using this one for a long time. And I actually put a tweet out the other day where this has served me so well. I cannot imagine needing to upgrade. But the power of the latest generation processor, chipset, and that graphics card, it's just what you'll be able to do. I mean, I don't play as many games on my notebook. It's more of a production workhorse. So rendering is now going to be an important thing, right? And that 3080 is just able to do it.
Oh, you are definitely going to want
especially at 4K. That. Not that I shoot at 4K, but one day when one does shoot at 4K, it just shows the power that you can get with these. And a lot of professionals in the creative industry use these notebooks for that purpose.
Definitely.
But yeah, also play some Cyberpunk when it gets fixed.
Oh yeah, that's a touchy subject. But hey, I'm enjoying it. It's fun. 100 hours in, and yeah, buggy but beautiful.
Yeah, buggy but beautiful. So that brings us to the end of the official talk on the stuff that really interested us from the chipset side. But there was a few other things that we also spotted that was really interesting to look at. We mentioned the Samsung robot. That was quite cool. So I'm not going to go into that. But I think what it did show that the house of the modern house having a robot is a lot closer to what we think. Obviously, these things aren't going to be readily available at your local tech shop anytime soon. And looking at my house, for example, I don't see how something like that could work effectively because South African houses generally don't have smooth floors.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of those houses that they show those demos in have got smooth floors that make it easy for those little robots to go around, especially the vacuum robot.
Definitely, like trying to vacuum our homes is a little trickier than.
Exactly. So, I mean, I've heard of some people that have those in South Africa, but for most of us, it's not really practical. But again, amazing to see that you can essentially have a battery in your home now, if you can afford it. So maybe one day when we make it big,
I definitely want
we'll get one of those.
No,
to bring you food, make you food.
Exactly. I want two. One just to have around me, and one to do all the other stuff.
Nice. I like that. Well, let's do a video about that when we get a chance. In these times that we are in, it was also not surprising to see a lot of technology around COVID-style living. Yeah. One of the things that stood out for me was masks. We saw a few masks being announced from a number of companies, basically turning a mask into something more intelligent and the piece of cloth that we had now. Now, the most interesting thing for me, because it was a gaming company, is the Razer mask, which was pretty interesting. The fact that, I mean, apart from the RGB on there, which is programmable, I mean, who does not love programmable RGB? But it's a clear screen mask with a speaker built in too. So, I mean, they're going after, especially, I guess, streamers that stream online where somebody watching, you can actually see more of your face. Being out in public for other people to hear you with that little microphone. But I still think the future of that is incorporating some of the other technologies we've seen with some of the other masks that were announced at CES 2021. And that is bringing intelligence like monitoring the air inside and outside of the mask, monitoring the oxygen that you're taking in.
Yes.
There's a lot of metrics that I can imagine that they could potentially build into this, including music. If you are going running with a mask or living with a mask on your face when you go out, You know, it could be more than just that piece of cloth.
Oh yeah,
you know,
that's
tech built
actually,
in.
yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. That is pretty exciting. Of course, we don't all want to be living with masks forever. I think it's going to be sticking with us for a long time.
Yeah, it is the reality of our lives right now.
Exactly. And having some intelligence in there, I can see a lot of benefit to that.
Oh, definitely. Now, the question is, how much is this all going to be? Because masks are relatively cheap, and if you're talking now with intelligence and all of that and monitoring.
Well, do you want the RGB version or the Wi-Fi version? That's the question you're going to have to ask yourself. You know?
Oh yeah, that's actually true. Soon enough, you'll actually have an account as well for your mask that monitors things like how well you're breathing and whatnot. There's actually a lot you can do around the mask, and all of it just powered by data.
Exactly.
Just processing off the
You have
data.
to also wonder if Google was onto something with the Google Glass. I just needed to modify it to Google Mask.
You know what it is with Google. Great ideas with terrible execution.
Yeah, and that's where they die.
Exactly.
Now, the last piece of tech that I thought was very interesting, and we watched a little video of this before the time, is rollable screens, which is clearly also dominating CES 2021. And in my opinion, it looks much better than foldable phones.
By far, it just looks like magic actually when you see it unfold. Just that, it's cool. I can stare at that forever. Now, obviously, at some point that novelty will run out, but it just looks so cool. That's the future I was talking about. It actually feels like post-2020 when you see smartphones and devices like that.
I mean, we all remember growing up with movies with digital screens, you know, pulling out a big screen. And again, that's a prototype that was showcased. Showing true, a livable screen really that folds up into your pocket, you know, and can be any size you want. I'm excited about the rollable phones. I mean, obviously, foldable phones have obviously come a long way and they're really looking sharp now. But there's something about that rollout screen. You know, you still have your same form factor, but your screen can either go higher or wider to give you a tablet feel or a long portrait.
I mean, I've always liked, you know, the original iPhone, I think the last one, iPhone SE. That form factor, I really love. I really like that. So with the foldable screen, you can still get the higher resolution and the more desktop space or whatever that you may want to use a bigger screen for. You can actually get that now with the foldable screen. I don't no longer have to have a big phone in my hand.
Yeah.
So just that allows a lot more people with smaller hands even to enjoy bigger screens.
I think we've come full circle. Remember, small phones. That's where we started. Then everybody was onto the phablet vibe, and now we all have big phones, and now we're all yearning for small phones again. We need to make our minds up. But I think on that note, we've had a wonderful few days following what's happening at CES, and we're going to be glued to our computer screens to see what's happening over the next few days.
There's a lot more still come.
And well, next week we'll chat about kind of the second part of CES and what happened there.
That's right.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like and subscribe our channel and follow us on Twitter.
All right then.
Till next time. Cheers.
Till next time. Take care. Peace. I hope that works.
That was cool.
You think it works? I think it works.